Hey guys, Chris here. Today we have a story about a park ranger working in Voyageurs National Park in Minnesota. There he makes a strange discovery and the Park Service is not happy about it. That's next. Okay, so I am in the studio tonight and I was out hiking today and I have footage of that and I put it together and I'm going to play that hike at the end of the video. It's turned out pretty cool. And I also had some of my new drone shots in there, so I was really happy with that. And today's beer, since we're talking about northern Minnesota and lake country, we have Tahoe beer, and that's the most famous lake around here. And really interesting, Tahoe beer was established in 1862, and they still have an old building in downtown Carson City. And it's now called the Brewery Arts Center. It's pretty interesting. And this is a blonde ale, and they are out of the brewer's cabinet up in Reno now. So we're gonna go with the clear glass here. Oh yeah, that is definitely a blonde ale. Look how light that is. I don't know if you guys can see that, but there we go. Look at that. Blonde ale. This is my sample glass. I don't drink out of this when I do my stories because there's no handle on it. They could do a fake handle like that, I guess, but I'll end up dropping it. Wow. Yeah, definitely an ale. It's got a really crisp finish to it. Very flavorful. Almost a little bit of sweetness to it. Low suds too. It didn't suds up really quick. I kind of like that. Yeah, very tasty. Cheers. And this is a hat my mom sent me. It's a Squatch, so thank you for the Squatch hat, Mom. Appreciate it. It's really a comfortable hat. It's like a stone-washed denim. Super comfortable. Looks kind of cool too. I like it. So, all right. So our story takes place in Voyageurs National Park of northern Minnesota, along the Canadian border with Ontario. It's about 55 miles long. Great country, very pristine wilderness, one of the most remote and pristine wilderness national parks in the United States. 218,000 acres of lakes, islands, cliffs, rivers, and wilderness. And it has wolves, moose, beaver, loons, and great fishing. More than a third of the park is water. And so the only way to travel, for the most part, is by canoe, kayak, or boat. There's a few roads that go into a couple of the visitor centers. And then from there, to really explore the park, you really need to be in a boat. So, great country. Our story is about Paul, who was a park ranger in 2001, and he made some recordings. And what I wanted to do before I start the story is to show the difference between a loon, a wolf, and a Bigfoot call, or at least a supposed Bigfoot call. So our first recording is from a common loon from northern Minnesota. Okay, so this next recording is a gray wolf, actually a couple of gray wolves from northern Minnesota. This third recording is from Ohio, and it was recorded in 1994 by Matt Moneymaker along the Ohio River, and it's called the Ohio Howl. Now there's a dog that's in the video as well that's responding to this Bigfoot. This last one is from the Cuyahoga Valley, Cuyahoga National Park in Ohio. This is really a good one as well, so listen to this. So now you can kind of see the difference in these wildlife sounds compared to a supposed Bigfoot. It was 2001. Paul was a park ranger at Voyageurs National Park. He had just finished a day of work. He was hanging out with a coworker at one of the lakes, and they were sitting on a dock. It was a warm summer night, and they were enjoying the stars and just talking about life. When all of a sudden, out of the woods, they heard this extremely loud and long howl. Now Paul knows what a gray wolf sounds like, and this was not that. This was far more distorted and more powerful, like whatever this was had an extremely large set of lungs. This was unlike anything he'd ever heard before. It was extremely loud and extremely long, lasting roughly 18 seconds. It sounded like it was coming from the south in the woods. They decided to go find the source. They ran back to the trailer they'd been staying at. They grabbed a handgun and 2 flashlights and went out into the forest, heading in the direction where they last heard this. It was very dark. They fortunately had the flashlights. They're weaving their way through the dark forest, listening. They didn't hear anything, and then suddenly they hear it again. They look at each other, they wait for less than a minute, and they heard it a second time. This time it was coming from the east, like it had moved, but they didn't hear it. They decided they needed to record this, so they ran back to the trailer, grabbed some recording equipment, and went back out in the forest yet again. They're walking out in the forest, it's pitch black. They had this recording equipment, they found a log. They set the equipment on the log, turned it on, and waited. They heard some movement off in the forest, a little ways away, and they heard this howl again. They captured this howl. They could feel the fear coming through their bodies because they're out in the middle of the forest, it's dark, and now they're hearing this howl, but they knew they needed to do what they could to record this. They kept it on, they heard it again. But this time, it sounded like it moved once again. It was moving around. They heard it again and a 4th time. Each time there was it moved slightly from where it was the previous time. After recording the 4th howl, they decided they had enough. They wanted to get out of there. They worked their way back out of the forest to the camper, and they wanted to hear what they had found. They turned the equipment on and they listened. They heard something in the background. After enhancing the audio, this is what they found. They could hear this loud growl, and as it progressed, it got higher in pitch, and then it changed. It seemed to be getting closer to them. After the howl ended, they could now hear another howl, and it sounded like it was on the other side of the lake, almost in response. The 2 things were talking to each other. Even though it was barely audible in the recording, they could clearly hear it. They could hear the howl over here, and then they could hear it over here. the south, and then the east. And they knew the lay of the land and where the lakes were, and they could clearly knew that it had to be on the other side of this particular lake. They listened to this over and over, and they were very excited about this, and they decided to post it on the Voyageurs National Park website and talk about this incident on the radio. As they were working on the website putting this together, the supervisor came in and asked them what they were doing. Paul told him what they had discovered and even played the recording back for the supervisor. The supervisor shut the whole thing down. Paul said he'd never seen him more serious or angry as he was on that day. He said, if you ever talk about this ever again, you could lose your jobs with the Park Service. You could be fired. They immediately deleted this file from the website. The supervisor had them hand over the file of the recording. They don't know what he did with it, but now he had it. They never talked about this again while they worked there, Paul and his co-worker. This had been haunting Paul for over 22 years. And he tried to block it out of his memory, but he couldn't because he knows there's something out there, something big and dangerous. But also there was something that was very curious about this for Paul. He's a park ranger, so he generally knows what the sounds are in the woods. He knows what a bear sounds like, a wolf, a moose. And this was no wolf or bear or moose. It was something different, something not normal or natural, at least that we know of. And it was very large and powerful. He wrote in his email that he didn't want to be alone with this anymore. He wanted to be heard and listened to, and people that would take him seriously. But he knows he couldn't reveal his identity, his full name, for fear of being blacklisted by the Park Service. He was really concerned to make sure that his first name was the only name given out because he didn't want to lose his job. I used to work in Yellowstone for the concessionaires back in the 80s when I was in college. And I actually had a friend that worked for the Park Service. In fact, one weekend we went to a fire lookout in the backcountry of Yellowstone, spent the weekend. It was a really cool time. The clouds came in really low and we were way above it. It was pretty amazing. So he may have some stories about this kind of thing as well. I don't know. I've lost touch with him. But interesting that we got a story about this. So, all right, you guys, that is our story from Voyageurs National Park from Paul. So thank you guys for watching. I am going to now play that hike that I did, and we'll talk to you guys later. Merry Christmas.